America's quality of life plummeting under Joe Biden since he took office from Donald J. Trump. Joe Biden has only been good for sponsoring crisis after crisis, from open borders to dangerous, violent Democrat-run cities to inflation to record-breaking gas prices. As a result, 88% of Americans say the country is on the wrong track. That is a record amount of dissatisfaction among our people. Yet, the Never Trump crowd says getting rid of Trump's economy, his secure border, his strong foreign policy, and his pro-American administration was worth all the misery you and your family are currently suffering.
At this moment, we are confronting a domestic threat that we have never faced before. And that is a former president who is attempting to unravel the foundations of our constitutional republic. Republicans cannot both be loyal to Donald Trump and loyal to the Constitution.
You know, Liz Cheney and Never Trumpers lecturing us on the future of the Republican Party is like the CEO of Planned Parenthood lecturing us on the future of youth in America. Let's discuss with former New York Governor and Republican George Pataki. Governor, it's always great to have you here. You know, in my lifetime, sir, I have never seen the Democrat Party so openly and brazenly dedicated to destroying our rights under the Constitution and destroying our safety, security, and way of life, led by Never Trumpers there like Liz Cheney, Mitch McConnell, Adam Kinzinger, crying Kinzinger, and Mitt Romney. Seems to me the Republican Party, the leadership anyway, doesn't seem to recognize the threat or doesn't want to fight it. In the face of such unprecedented threats from within, can Americans afford a timid GOP at this point in our history?
Well, we can't afford the Biden administration, and we can't afford the Democrats running Congress. But I would take issue. Look at the 50 Republican senators have stood together time and again to block things like the so-called Build Back Better that would have just ruined our finances and made inflation so far worse. So I'm not a Never Trumper, but I'm also not a pro-Trumper. I think it's time for us to move on and look at the future. You outlined the problems. Biden has screwed up everything he touched. The border, the economy, our energy issues, Afghanistan, everything he touches, he screws up. We need to focus on Republicans winning this November and not in 2024. Let's look to the future, believing in our policies and not trying to hash over the past time and time again.
Well, yeah, you know, Governor, you made a great point, because I think a lot of conservatives were so happy with results. It wasn't the cult of Trump. It was, for example, we had been hearing the Republican Party promising border security for years. Years and years and years, and here comes this upstart, never held political office before, just a businessman. He got that done, and the Republican Party, and certainly never the Democrat Party, could get that done. Doesn't results count for something in the GOP, or shouldn't it?
Of course it should. And you mentioned the border, and you're totally right on that. We had a successful policy under Trump. We have an abject failure under Biden. And we've got to change that, which is why I want to see the Republicans win this November. And the idea that certain Republicans are unfit and we're better off with some left-wing Democrat, to me, just is insanity. All we're doing is empowering Pelosi and Schumer. Every Republican who loses to a left-wing Democrat is just empowering them to pack the courts, to continue to have open borders, to continue to destroy our energy industry. And I think we have to have a big tent. And you probably disagree with this, but I've never been a Never Trumper, but I'm not a pro-Trumper. I think we need to move forward. And the 2022 elections, if Donald Trump announces before then that he's running, it's going to be a referendum on him. It shouldn't be. It should be a referendum on Joe Biden and the failure of the Democrats to govern this state. You pointed out 88% of Americans think we're headed in the wrong direction. Don't we want to argue that this fall that Biden and the Democrats are screwing up, as opposed to look at Donald Trump, won't he be a great president 3 years from now? To me, it's very simple. Focus on the present, look to the future, point out the failing of the Democrats, come together as Republicans, and win majorities so we can change border policy. We can change our energy policy. We can rebuild our defense.
Well, Governor, I think it's a fair point that you point out that we need to focus on staunching the bleeding right now. But I also think it's fair to look, you know, just 2 short years ago, none of this garbage was happening in our country. And comparing records from the previous administration and the current administration, I think is number one, completely fair and ought to be done. And I think it was Ronald Wilson Reagan who said, "Are you better off now than you were, 4 years ago?" And I think it's a fantastic discussion to be having, saying, wasn't America better off under President Trump and his administration and the patriots there than under this current left-wing regime that seems to have more in common with China than they have Americans? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. I think it's totally fair. Are you better off now than you were 2 years ago? And I think the overwhelming majority of Americans would say no. But that's what we have to point out. The fact that they are failing, and look to the future and come up with solutions. Come up with a solution on the border. Turn our energy industry loose so we can lower our own prices and help defeat the Russians as they barbarically continue to attack Ukraine. We have to rebuild our defenses in the face of the Chinese threat. But let's look forward. Let's not look backward.
Well, Governor, you took me right where I wanted to go, because you're right. The enemies out there are gathering unopposed, and one of America's enemies, who have long been an enemy of America, the Russians, along with the communist Chinese. Now, you've actually been doing some work to help those who are victims of the Russians, the Ukrainians. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the George Pataki Center has had volunteers in Ukraine. I've been there myself twice. We had volunteers there again last week. And what we're doing is trying to fill the humanitarian void. They just don't have the housing, the food, the medicine that they need. There are over 7 million internally displaced Ukrainians. And all this promised Western aid, Biden billions in humanitarian aid for Ukraine, you don't see any of it in Ukraine itself. And it's his failed bureaucracy that may appropriate the funds and put out a press release, but the money's not getting on the ground. So we've had contributions, and you can see some pictures of the housing, the temporary housing we've put in place. We're going to try to continue to do more. But I want to mention one other thing. They need weapons. The Russians are just destroying everything in their path, and we have sent them 4 HIMARS, the artillery system. Russians claim to destroy 2 of them. They need dozens and dozens and dozens if they're to have any chance. But this president is leading from behind. Europe is taking the lead, and he does the minimum to help the Ukrainians militarily. He has to do more. The West has to do more. This is a battle between freedom and autocracy.
Well, Governor Pataki, I think you're illustrating, Republicans who have a conservative mindset and a service-oriented mindset getting their hands dirty, where a bureaucracy put on by Democrats fails, and it always fails. Governor Pataki, thank you for your time. Spirited discussion, sir. Come back soon.
Thank you. Great being on with you.